When you think of Greek myths, most people stop at the Trojan War. They know about the wooden horse, about brave warriors, about Helen whose face launched 1,000 ships, about Achilles who was strong except for that one small place, about Hector who fought with honor, and about the long years of battle under the hot sun of Troy's plains. But what happened after the Trojan War is not always told in the same detail, and it is often even more confusing, because the Greeks, rather than going home victorious and happy, had journeys filled with storms, curses, betrayals, and restless gods who were not done playing with mortal lives. So if you are lying down, wanting a story not for excitement but for drowsy thoughts, the long, winding tale of what came after Troy can carry you away, because it is not neat and simple, but tangled like threads of an old tapestry. The story does not end with a horse rolled into the city, but rather unravels into countless smaller tales, each hero wandering, suffering, or falling to tragic fates, one by one, like embers going out after a great fire. Let us start with Agamemnon, the king who led the Greeks, the high commander who had sacrificed his own daughter Iphigenia to get the winds to blow toward Troy. He returned to Mycenae after 10 years of war, and you might think his wife Clytemnestra would be waiting with open arms. But instead she had been nursing anger, bitterness, and betrayal, and while he was gone she had taken a lover, Aegisthus. So when Agamemnon finally came back, bringing with him the Trojan princess Cassandra as a captive and concubine, he walked into a trap. Clytemnestra killed him in his bath, striking him down with an axe, and Cassandra too was slain, despite her gift of prophecy that nobody ever believed. The house of Atreus, already cursed for generations, spilled more blood. This became a cycle, for later Orestes, the son of Agamemnon, would take revenge on his mother, urged on by his sister Electra. He killed Clytemnestra, and in doing so brought the wrath of the Furies upon him, those spirits of vengeance that never let a murderer rest. Orestes wandered tormented, pursued by nightmares, until at last the gods themselves put him on trial in Athens. There, the goddess Athena cast the deciding vote that acquitted him, bringing an end to the endless cycle of bloodshed in that family. That is one thread after Troy, a thread of vengeance, justice, and uneasy peace. But Agamemnon was only one of many kings. Menelaus, his brother, had the most famous wife of all, Helen of Troy, whose beauty had caused the war. After the fall of Troy, Menelaus and Helen began their own journey home, but the seas were not kind. Some say he almost killed her in rage, still blaming her for all the deaths, but others say they were reconciled. Their journey took them to Egypt, where Helen was mistaken for a goddess. Menelaus wandered through strange lands, offering sacrifices and searching for safe passage. At last, after much delay, he reached Sparta with Helen, and there they lived out their days in royal splendor. Later poets would tell that after death, Helen was taken to the Isles of the Blessed, and Menelaus too was given a special fate. Unlike most mortals, he did not go to the dark underworld, but was allowed to live forever in a paradise, because he was a son-in-law of Zeus through his marriage to Helen, who was the daughter of the god. So while their lives were stormy, their ending was strangely fortunate compared to many others. Then there was Nestor, the old and wise counselor of the Greeks. His story after Troy was quieter. He returned home to Pylos and was able to rule in peace, living to old age with his family. In fact, when Odysseus's son Telemachus later went searching for news of his missing father, he went first to Nestor, because Nestor was one of the few who had returned safely and was still alive. Nestor's tale is one of the rare happy endings, though perhaps less dramatic, and so less often told. But not all fates were peaceful. Take Ajax the Lesser, not to be confused with Ajax the Great who had already died at Troy. Ajax the Lesser had committed a terrible crime in the sack of Troy. He dragged Cassandra from the altar of Athena and violated her, ignoring the sacred protection of the goddess. This outraged Athena, who swore vengeance. On his journey home, Ajax's ship was struck by a storm. He survived the wreck and boasted that not even the gods could kill him, which only made them angrier. Poseidon split the rock he clung to, and he was swallowed by the sea, punished for his arrogance and sacrilege. His fate was a warning about hubris, about pride that challenges the divine. Diomedes, the warrior favored by Athena during the war, also had a troubled return. Though he was one of the bravest, who even wounded the gods in battle, his homecoming was bitter. His wife betrayed him, having been unfaithful while he was away, and plots were made against his life. He left Argos and wandered, eventually founding cities in Italy. Some traditions say he died there, honored by the locals, while others tell of his restless wandering. In any case, the war hero could not simply return home and live as before. The world had shifted, and the gods' favor was fleeting. And then, perhaps the most famous story of all, the return of Odysseus. His tale became the Odyssey, a whole epic in itself. Unlike the others, Odysseus wandered for 10 long years across seas filled with monsters, witches, storms, and temptations. He blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus, which earned him the hatred of Poseidon, god of the sea, who delayed him at every turn. He met Circe, who turned men into pigs. He heard the deadly songs of the sirens. He journeyed to the underworld to speak with the dead. He was kept for years by the nymph Calypso on her island, who offered him immortality if he would stay with her, but he longed always for Ithaca, for his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. Back at home, Penelope was besieged by suitors who assumed Odysseus was dead, and she cleverly delayed them by weaving and unweaving a shroud. At last Odysseus returned in disguise, tested the loyalty of his household, and with the help of his son slaughtered the suitors in a bloody revenge. His story shows not only the wrath of the gods, but the endurance of one man's longing for home and the cleverness that saw him through trial after trial. Another tale is of Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. He had been brought to Troy in the later years of the war, and it was he who killed King Priam at the altar of Zeus. After the war, he sailed homeward but was led to settle in Epirus instead. There he married Hermione, the daughter of Helen and Menelaus, but this led to tensions, for Orestes claimed her too. In the end, Neoptolemus was killed, either by Orestes or by ambush at Delphi. Even the son of the greatest warrior was not spared tragedy, showing how violence echoed on long after the war ended. Then there is the sad tale of Aeneas, a Trojan rather than a Greek, but his story begins after the fall of Troy. Aeneas, carrying his aged father on his back and leading his son by the hand, fled the burning city. Guided by the will of the gods, he wandered across the seas much like Odysseus, facing storms and trials. His journey took him to Carthage, where Queen Dido fell in love with him, but he left her to fulfill his destiny. Dido, abandoned, took her own life. Finally, Aeneas reached Italy, where his descendants would one day found Rome. His tale was later glorified by the Romans themselves, but it began as one of the many threads unwinding after the Trojan War, showing how one city's destruction became the seed for another's rise. The stories go on, as if no one could escape the curse of Troy. The war had been so terrible, so prolonged, that it seemed the gods had decided none of its participants would have simple peace. Storms, betrayals, wanderings, madness, all were scattered across the returning heroes. Some reached home only to find it poisoned by treachery. Some never reached it at all. Some built new homes in distant lands, carrying fragments of Troy or Greece to Italy, to Asia Minor, to the edges of the known world. In a way, the Trojan War never ended, because its echoes spread through generations and across seas, in myths told and retold. And so, when you think of what happened after the Trojan War, it is not one story, but a tangle of many, where victory tasted bitter and homecomings were twisted. It is a reminder that wars do not end neatly with the fall of a city, but ripple outward, reshaping lives and lands. For the Greeks who told these stories, perhaps it was a way of explaining the restless world around them, the colonies they founded, the families torn by conflict, the sense that the gods could never truly be appeased. For us, listening now in the quiet, it is a slow drifting journey through sorrow, fate, and wandering, the kind of story that stretches on like the sea, without hurry, circling back upon itself, until at last it grows quiet. And in that quiet you can almost hear the waves that carried those long ago ships, the whispers of heroes who could not find rest, and the soft closing of a story that was never simple, but always full of shadows.